Privet Katila Waning Desu, and this is the weekly update for the Russian-Ukrainian War for the week of September 4th to September 10th. So today we're going to be starting in the main axis of the Ukrainian offensive in the Orekho front. So for this week, we've basically got confirmation based on geolocated videos that the village of Robotina, which has been the center of this offensive for 3 months now, has basically completely fallen to the AFU, to the Ukrainian forces. However, a Russian counterattack that happened earlier in the week managed to secure some Russian, to be able to have the Russians be able to secure the heights right outside the village, which is what is important on the western side of the village and on the southern side of the village. There's been some AFU attempts to try to take this. Some maps, especially pro-Ukrainian maps, say they've entered this area, but a lot of pro-Russian maps say the Russians still hold control over this. And so it's still a little bit of an unknown, depends on who you trust, but the Ukrainians still haven't completely secured the heights as of yet. And so even if you think they are trying right now. So basically the purpose of this is that, as I mentioned in the last weekly update, taking the village of Robotina is more of a morale thing. What matters is securing these heights, as you can see here, because once you secure these heights, they could continue going more south to try to take Nova Prokhorovka and then start offensive operations to try to take the first Russian defense line that is shown here based on satellite images. As I mentioned, it's being able to take the southern part of Robotina isn't a big breakthrough. They still have to take the heights for it to matter tactically, but it is worth mentioning that, I think it's fair to say that they have captured the village of Robotina. A little bit more west, the Ukrainians, based on some videos, have been shown to advance a little bit more, trying to wedge themselves between Vervova and Robotina. The purpose of these, again, is to try to wedge and to make sure that Russian defenses here are automatically broken so they don't have to attack directly from a lower position. This is a bad position for the Ukrainians to attack. They could get an easier attack if they squeeze down here and try to attack Nova Prokhorovka from the eastern side, which would then, if they manage to break through, would collapse this side and the Russians would have to withdraw back here. So they've, the Ukrainians have wedged into this position for almost a month now. They made a few advances here. Again, one thing about this is there's a gray zone. There's a place where the Ukrainians are secured and in their positions, and there's a place where the Russians are. But then between them, there's a no man's land. Not necessarily a no man's land where nobody is. It's where both sides attack to try to secure themselves. And if they, and sometimes they enter it, but then maybe the other side does artillery attacks, forcing them to withdraw or do counterattacks because they haven't secured themselves fully. So just because, for example, we might geolocate a Russian or a Ukrainian in one of these areas doesn't mean that the Russians or the Ukrainians are fully secure in that area, if that makes sense. But it does show that they are operating in that area. But that's basically the only way we could get 100% confirmation of a place being under someone's control. But that's one thing to keep in mind about it. Now, going a bit more west as well, Ukrainians have continued trying to attack Verbotina, or Vervova. Sorry, I mixed the two. Sorry, Vervova. And the Ukrainians, despite constant attacks, have failed to enter the village itself. The Russians still have full control of it. Again, as I mentioned in the last episode, or last week, is that the Ukrainians need to secure Robotina in order to secure their eastern flank. Right now, the operational goal of the Ukrainian offensive is to reach the city of Tokmak. However, I do not see this happening. I think the Ukrainians know this as well. And I think right now, the main purpose of this operation is to secure Vervova, Robotina, probably Nova Prokhorovka, and Kopany and Rivnia. That way, and this settled one too. So that way, the Ukrainians could form a new defense line. So before, their defense line was around here, and then next they'll have a defense line kind of like right here. Kind of, make a new way they could secure positions so they could then attack and try to break through the first Russian defense line and try to reach the second Russian defense line, which Tokmak is part of, for maybe next offensive. So that way they could have some sort of tactical success. However, even if they do manage to take, these villages right here and secure a bridgehead, this isn't, it's more of just like a small tactical victory. This is nowhere near what the offensive was supposed to secure, which was reaching the Sea of Azov here. trying to cut the Russian land bridge, and just securing this area here, which is kind of what they're focusing on, is, well, very, very small indeed. This is the Rybar map in terms of the Orekha front. As you can see in this map, they have the southern edge is under Russian control, the southern trenches on the heights. And they also have the southern edge of Robotyne as part of a gray zone, which you could, is, I think you could say that's fair. Obviously, they're not as secure as they are more further back, because the Russians have very good positions to keep attacking this area here in the southern edge of Robotyne. However, despite I think the video is showing the Ukrainians going on the attack to try to take these fortifications here in front of Nova Pavlovka. I think it's fair to say that they've managed to capture the village, the Ukrainians have. But again, as I mentioned, they have not been able to enter Verbova or Nova Pavlovka as of yet. But they have been able to wedge a little bit here. But anyway, so that's the Orekha front. Let's go now to the other side of the Zaporozhye offensive. Now, this is happening in kind of the South Donetsk offensive. Rybar crosses the Vermivka ledge. I kind of put this as part of the same even though it's kind of taking place in Donetsk. I kind of count this area kind of from Ugledar to here. I kind of count this as the same front line, even though they kind of span two oblasts. But anyway, so the second part of this offensive has been happening here. And this interesting thing about this week is that the Ukrainians have relaunched offensive operations in this sector. Instead of going down, they are doing kind of the same thing as the Orekha front. They are trying to secure their flanks. As I mentioned, that is what they're supposed to be trying to do. So they attacked Novodonetska and Novomayorska. There has been multiple attacks. It wasn't just a one-off attack. It was a serious offensive. With Rybar says there's up to 1,000 troops involved, which is actually pretty big in terms of the battles that have been waged so far in this war. This is not a World War II style hundreds of thousands of troops battling over, areas of the front. It's kind of a more smaller scale version of that, but a way smaller scale. But anyway, so Ukrainian attacks have been repulsed in Novodonetsk. This village is still under full Russian control. However, eventually, according to some geolocated videos, the Ukrainians managed to wedge themselves into the first few houses of Novomayorska here. Now, if they don't manage to develop the front, if they're able to secure themselves here, put more troops here and manage to push the Russians out, just staying here is a very bad position for them to be in. The Russians could just pound this area repeatedly and destroy everything. It would be a very bad place for the Ukrainians to try to sit there. So unless they expand, I don't see them holding this, but they could expand. If they do expand, well, that'd be good for them. Now, the purpose of these attacks would be going, well, aren't they trying to take Staromilivka, keep going down, because this is where the offensive has been? Why are they attacking all the way to the east here? Well, again, the purpose is to secure the flanks. They can't keep going south without securing the flanks, or else the Russians could attack them on the flanks and it would be bad. They want to take these two settlements so that they could then go down, take Kremenchuk, which is kind of the flank defense position of Staromilivka, and if they can take this area here, then they basically have secured their flank on the east. And then we should probably expect Ukrainian offensive operations here to take Pryutia, Stepova, etc., to try to secure themselves on the western front. Speaking of this area, according to Rybar, the Russians have actually been able to move forward and secure themselves along this area here, and give themselves a better breathing position. Basically, the Russians know the Ukrainians are going to attack here to secure their flanks, so they're making it a bit harder for the Ukrainians to be able to take this village here. So again, we should expect an attack here, but for the last week, most of the focus has been Ukrainian attacks here to secure these two villages here, with no success here and a small insurgent here. But we have to see how they are able to expand this little foothold they got. It just depends on what they do. Again, the purpose is to secure their flanks so that they could then do an attack on all sides on Staromilivka, which is kind of the main focus of their operation. I'm thinking the main purpose here, again, is to then be able to kind of reach the first Russian defense line so that next time they could just break through on multiple areas here. So that's what happened on the Veliko Novosolika area. We're going to now go a bit more north to the Bakhmut front. So this place has been this week has been, this is the the Rybar situation in the Vermika, in the Velika Novosilica line. Again, you can see these attacks happening on this area, on these villages. The Russians have attacked and gained a little bit more positions here. So this is the Rybar, the Russian source. That kind of shows the area here. Okay, so for the Bakhmut, what's happening last week for Bakhmut? This situation has been kind of deteriorating for the Russians a little bit. It's not a complete collapse, but the Ukrainians have made some tactical success in this area. In the northern front of Bakhmut, all is quiet. According to some, the Ukrainian offensive that started here 2 or 3 weeks ago kind of ended in failure. The Russians pushed the Ukrainians out and basically pushed them back to kind of this area here, and so they still secure themselves along this area. However, most of the fighting has been, actually almost all the fighting has been mostly in the south Bakhmut direction. In this, basically in most videos, it's been the Ukrainians have managed to break the Russian defensive and have re-entered Klishevka. They have taken the southern and central part. However, the Russians still secure the northern part and this area right here. So the Ukrainians are trying to push them out completely from Klishevka. They really want this win because there's been no success so far except trying to take some fields in the Bakhmut direction. But if they do able to take Klishevka, it would be their first village taken since starting this over 3 months ago. So the Ukrainians have not fully captured this yet, but they are trying to push the Russians out of the northern sector and from the basically from the north here. The Russian positions are along this rail line here. Speaking of which, after the fall of Klishevka, the Ukrainians, or at least the southern part, the Ukrainians not only advanced from here to the south of Andriivka, but also to the north here. Now, the Ukrainians have not taken Andriivka yet. However, a lot of sources have said that the Russians have withdrawn after they basically got put into a pincer and withdrew to this rail line. So it's in the gray zone. I expect the Ukrainians to try to take it just to say, hey, we took 2 villages. However, it's going to be hard. They have to it's right in front of Russian positions, and they'll have to actually break through here. So it might be a bit harder. It might not be as simple as just walking in here, but they might try. So the Ukrainians have made some success here to be able to capture the center and southern part of Klishevka here, along with Andriivka. Almost, not quite just yet. But it wouldn't be a surprise if the Russians lost these 2 villages and withdrew to their main positions along the rail line. Now, why is this important? Because Klishevka is on the heights, and if the Ukrainians are managed to puncture through the Russian defenses along the rail line, they basically it's going to be a lot easier for them to basically not collapse, but very threaten the southern edge of the Bakhmut defense. I wouldn't be surprised if the next, they're going to probably try to cut this main highway that connects the Gorlivka to Bakhmut, and basically this is kind of the lifeline helps Russians supply this southern part of Bakhmut. Now, the Ukrainians are trying to encircle Bakhmut, try to put the pressure so that, if they could succeed on the northern front, basically try to do a reverse of what the Russians did. So far they've been successful here, but, it took them 3 months to do it, and it's a lot longer than, and there's been no progress on the northern front for the most part. So just taking the southern part is not, even if they break through here and manage to reach Openda, Mikhailova, and so forth, even if they manage to push all the way to this kind of rail line, to this highway, they still can't force the Russians out of the fortified Bakhmut city without taking the northern part as well, which they have been failures at. But, again, taking Klishevka and Andriivka is the first step to trying to continue offensive operations to be successful here. Without taking them, there is no chance, but with them, this gains them a good foothold to continue forward. But again, this might be as much as they take because it all depends on how much Russian defense lines are good here. If they've been slacking, the Ukrainians could be able to push forward. But I wouldn't be surprised if, but it could be that they wasted a lot of their troops just trying to take these 2 villages, and which are most likely going to fall. Again, the Russians still hold the northern part of Klishevka. They might deny the Ukrainians being able to enter Andriivka for the most part. So again, the battles are still going on. The Ukrainians have a good chance of probably are going to take these 2 villages, but even if they do, it's going to be very hard for them to continue operations. Or, it just depends. But again, even if they are completely successful in this direction, they have to be successful in the north to squeeze the Russians out of Bakhmut, which is the purpose of this place here. So again, it's a bit tactically a setback for the Russians here, a tactical, a success for the Ukrainians, but again, it's not an operational success thus far. But again, some success for the Ukrainians on this front. And this is the Rybar's Bakhmut map here. We could see kind of the same position here. They kind of say that the Ukrainians entered the village here, but so it just depends. Maybe the Ukrainians did take it, but who knows. So again, the Klishevka and Andriivka are under full attack, and the Ukrainians are basically, again, as you can see, on the hills here, allowing them to have a better position to attack Russian positions here. All right, so we're going to go to the Donetsk front here. The big news of this week has been in Marinka, which has been kind of paused for the last few, a few months. They kind of were fighting here in the winter, and then they kind of stopped. However, there's been a restart of offensive operations, as we see from the Rybar map here. We could see that the Russians have reached the river here, and basically only the westernmost edge of Marinka is still under Ukrainian control. I've heard that this is a gray zone. The Ukrainians don't actually have troops here. They have troops kind of more back here in this village. But it's kind of hard for the Russians to be able to secure themselves here because it's under Ukrainian artillery control. So, but the Russians have managed to go forward more, and kind of, taking Marinka is kind of more just try to push the Ukrainian artillery further back so that they can't attack Donetsk itself. This is the same reason why they've been attacking Avdiivka, Peremyska, and so forth. They are trying to basically push the Ukrainians out from the front line of Donetsk so Donetsk doesn't get shelled daily as it is. So there've been some success in Marinka. They've also been, according to geolocated videos, constant attacks on Krasnogorovka. They've been really heavily attacking in this area, and they've been also heavily attacking Novomikhailivka here in this area with heavy attacks. This could just be to draw Ukrainians here away from the Ugledar and Velika Novosolika line, but it could also be that the Russians have plans to break through here. Again, if they manage to take Marinka, Pojeda, Novomikhailivka, and, let's say establish themselves like here, well, then they just cut off the main supply line to Ugledar, and then they could maybe develop and try to get behind Ugledar, and which would collapse, again, this critical junction here. So, that could be what they do, but, who knows? Maybe it's just a small, pushes of opportunity. There's been some chatter that the Ukrainians have been getting closer to Opina. The Russians still control these 2 villages. The purpose of taking these villages for the Ukrainians is more to deny the Russians the ability to encircle Avdiivka. Again, with the control of Krasnogorovka here and Vodana and Opina here, they basically have a good chance. They could theoretically try to encircle Avdiivka. However, they lose Krasnogorovka. If they lose Opina or Vodana, then they basically are hit in terms, they kind of got denied the ability to encircle Avdiivka, which is kind of the purpose here. So it's going to be very hard for them to do that. So that's what the Ukrainians have been trying to push them out of here. So far, they've not been successful, but they've been trying for this week. In other news, on both the Kherson front and in the Swatovo-Liman front, there's been very little offensive operations. There's been some back and forth positional defensives in the Serebransky forest here near Kremenaya. The Russians have been advanced a little bit here. There's been some advancements in the middle in here around this area. The Russians have been trying to put pressure on these 2 villages to secure it, so they could push the Ukrainians back to the Kharkiv Oblast. But again, these aren't official offensive operations for the same reason, Ukrainian kind of island attacks here in Kherson aren't really a serious offensive push as of yet, because this is more to pin down Russian or Ukrainian forces. Russians here in Kherson and then Ukrainians in in the Swato-Liman Front, so that they could draw reserves away from the main axis of attacks, which is in Zaporozhye and Bakhmut. But in terms of any, there's been no really big changes on the map in terms of these fronts in order to mention, but they've been some localized reconnaissance attacks to pin down Russian forces to make them not say, oh, this place is secure, let's send troops here. They want to keep Russian troops here so that this place is weaker. Same thing for why the Russians attack here. They want Ukrainians to move troops away from Bakhmut to here. The Ukrainians also keep trying to attack Crimea. There's been constant attacks with drones with troops, but they keep getting repelled. I have no idea what the purpose of this are. I think maybe they want to put Russian troops here so that maybe they do plan on doing an offensive operation here. There's been some talks from Russian sources that the Ukrainians want to create a bridgehead here, but honestly, I think that's a waste of time. Again, they'll be in the same position the Russians were on the other side, except they won't have a big bridge to supply themselves. They have to basically collapse the entire Kherson front and collapse the Zaporozhye front. So the only way this makes sense, if they want, is to collapse the if the Zaporozhye front collapses and the Ukrainians are moving here, trying to enter from Zaporozhye to Kherson, and then if the Russians try to secure themselves here, the Ukrainians could attack, try to collapse it on two sides, and force the Russians back to Crimea. That's the plan, but again, they're not making much progress in Zaporozhye, as we can see. So that's the end of the video. I hope you and this is the Rybar map on Kherson. Again, mutual shelling and island battles, as we can see. So that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, I hope you like this video and share it around. And if you really like this video or just like it in general, I hope you subscribe to this channel to see more videos like this one and other videos. So aim high, wander on, from America with Russian love.